right, y'all, welcome to this special session of RxJS workshop. We're so excited because Ben Lesh, who is the creator of RxJS, is going to just answer a lot of questions of live code, and hopefully you all learned something today with an interactive audience for the very first time. Super stoked, Ben. We are ready for you. Do you want me to start with questions, or do you want to say hi? Or
I actually, so hi, I'll do that. But like the first thing I would like to know from everybody here, just like as a general sort of show of hands, how many people are here who have actually used RxJS before? Like, I'm gonna assume, I mean, I can't see people's cameras and stuff, so.
you got like, I would say like probably 30%.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna say 30%. And like of the remaining folks, how many people here have like you know, seen RxJS before or have some idea of what it? All right, so the big thing with RxJS, and let me I'm going to share my screen so I can type stuff. Host disabled. I cannot share my screen, host.
I know, I like to have ultimate control.
What you doing to me?
Hold on. Okay, there you go. You can share now, I think.
All right. Share.
Can you?
Yeah, now I can.
Cool.
Now it's
Perfect.
slightly happier. Share. And the only reason, usually I use StackBlitz. I'm going to do with Code Sandbox today because I might decide that we're going to do some tests. So, and that has
people are really into testing. We got a lot of free questions of like testing, please.
Well, in an hour and a half, we might have to dedicate like the last half of this to testing, because testing is kind of, well, we can go over some of the basics, but all right. So you can see what I was playing with recently. I've been playing with Vue and stuff like that, but I'm going to do like vanilla TypeScript.
Oh, just FYI, sorry to interrupt you, but definitely some folks here are super interested in Vue 3 and RxJS as well.
Oh, well, they're in luck because I was just digging through that these last couple of days. So anyways, the latest version of RxJS is actually 7.1 now, because we released a couple new features. But the important bit is this: like when the first thing, your first interaction with RxJS is going to be like someone gives you an observable. I don't want anyone, when they're first starting out, don't worry about operators. What you really need to know is like the observable type. And I'm going to import interval just so I have an observable to work with. And all this is just like an observable of numbers over time. So this is going to emit once every half a second or every 500 milliseconds. And it's just going to be like 0, 1, 2, 3, you know, and so on forever. It never, ever stops. And like the way that you get data out of an observable, quite simply put, is you subscribe to it and it gives you a value and you can do whatever you want with it. In this case, I'll just log it out. Right. And so if I look down in here, you can see it's giving me values. I'll refresh because sometimes it keeps the ones from the other one. So it's gonna keep going forever. Now, you want to be able to stop this, right? Like you might not want this interval to go forever. That would be a memory leak, right? In your app, you don't want a never-ending interval. So what you can do in RxJS, you can get a subscription off of it, and then at some later time, and I'll do it in a set timeout, so it's obvious. We'll say we'll wait about 3 seconds, and then we will unsubscribe on it. Where's my code complete? Anyway, there. So this is, let me refresh again. So you can see it'll go for a little while and then it stops because we unsubscribe. Now, this is kind of like your first like baby steps. Like I've got an observable. Don't worry about merge map and concat map and all that stuff. The important bit is this observable type. And I can't stress that enough. If someone said, could you get rid of, you have to get rid of either operators or observable itself, I would throw away operators all day long, twice on Sunday. People can make their own operators. Like that's not a big deal. It's people love them because you can do some interesting and powerful things with them. But I'm gonna just clear this out in between. But like the important bit is the actual observable type because it's super duper primitive. Like what this interval is actually just this observable. So I'm gonna comment this out and I'll show you the equivalent. So this would be source equals new observable. And you get a subscriber, and the subscriber, you can call next on it and it gives you a value, right? So you can see hi. And then you can also call complete on it, which I'm not actually showing here. I'm not subscribed to where we complete, but you can send through complete notifications. But with interval, if I wanted to make the same thing as interval, what this is basically we're saying, okay, I got an interval. And every single time this interval goes, I'm going to next out some number that I'm incrementing, right? And let me, oh, what's happening? Oh, I made my interval too fast. Oh, I needed to put some time there. Right. Hold on, I've locked this up. Let's do over. Oh, I got to get the, I've got the
And feel free to unmute yourselves and, you know, ask questions if you're like, whoa, what exactly is happening here? And, you know, it might be better to unmute yourself and ask, like there's some questions like, okay, how do you implement custom operators safely? You know, where did the source $sign pattern come from?
Right. All right. So now this will be working better. Let me make this the right size. So now we're in here and you can see we're doing the same thing. But like the other side of this when you're creating your own observable is I have this interval. This is technically like I didn't do anything with this ID. This is still going. Like if I was to log in here and just put the word tick in there or something like that. Whenever I refresh this, so you can see it start going, like you can see, okay, we stopped, we unsubscribed, we're not getting anything else, but it's still ticking forever. So we need to make sure that that stops. And one of the things we can do is we can return a teardown, and in the teardown say clear interval. And so let's refresh this so it stops ticking from the other one. Here we go. And we're done. Like it's torn down. It's no longer, this is no longer ticking. So this right here is roughly speaking what the source of this was. So this is kind of how you can make your own observable. Now you can imagine that you can do whatever you want inside here. I'm going to comment this out so we don't subscribe, but you can go in here and you can be like, okay, I want, you know, a socket that's a new web socket that goes to whatever it is. I think it's like websocket.org echo and socket on connect, or is it on open? On open. So when we open, let's send hi there, and then socket on message. Subscriber next e. Let's get the data out of it. And then when we unsubscribe, we want to socket close. All right, so we can do this, and we could even just keep sending the same thing back and forth. Let's have it keep sending over and over and over again, right? This should loop. So now if I go and I subscribe to it, let's see, what's it upset about? It's insecure. It doesn't like that. Let's try that. Is it happy? Is it sad? Doesn't like it. Well, maybe I can't do, maybe this isn't actually doing anything. I don't even know. I'd have to examine it. But the basic idea is that you can set up anything inside of new observable, and you have this deterministic teardown. And whenever you unsubscribe, it's going to make sure you clean up. So if you've got like a resize observer or, you know, anything like that, a broadcast channel, you name it, you can set it up inside of here. And this is what an observable is.
Wait,
and the nice thing about it is if I was to say, oh, I want to just do this once and close, I could say, okay, subscriber.close, or I'm sorry, complete. And right after it next, it completes. And when you complete or you error or whatever, this teardown is always called afterwards. So it makes sure that you clean up what you're doing after. And so the observable itself is great because you can be 0 to any number of values over any amount of time, or even synchronously. And you can do anything. This is just a function body that gets executed when you subscribe. So you can do anything you want inside of here. You can console log, you can add numbers, you can do anything a function can do inside of an observable, and have this thing that if there's an error or you complete or somebody unsubscribes from it with this uniform shape, it will tear everything down. And that's the biggest advantage. If you walk away from this with nothing else, knowing that is the biggest thing ever. Observables are far and away, I mean, promises have a very specific use case of give me one value and promise me that you're going to give me one value. And if you don't, you have to error. Observables are like, here's this lazy cancelable thing that could give you a value, or maybe not give you a value, or like give you 100 values, and it's the same shape. So you can use it for all sorts of different things. And so it's a very powerful type, a very powerful tool to have in your pocket. I hope that it actually gets standardized in some format. Doesn't necessarily have to be this one, but observable, the type, exists in libraries like Relay, Svelte, just like this same exact shape exists in so many places, and people don't really realize what's going on. Even if you look at like, oh, look, if I have an event listener, like you have some button or whatever, and you're like add event listener, and you give it like click, and then you some callback, right? The single value. I mean, you know, this is not super differently shaped than that. Doesn't return a subscription. If it did, that'd be amazing. You know, subscription. And so you didn't have to do a remove event listener. And then if it was like, oh, well, wait, instead of doing click, we were like on click, subscribe, like, you know, like you can, it would be phenomenal. Or even if it was just like clicks or whatever. The same basic concept exists all over. And this is the kind of the observer pattern that exists, but observable is kind of a weird bridge between an observer pattern and like an iterator pattern, which is more pull based and that sort of thing. All right, so I just dumped a lot at you about plain old observable, which again, to me, I think is the most important part of the library.
Did WebSocket not work because you didn't?
I don't have the chat up, so I'm going to get that where I can see it. Sorry.
Did WebSocket not work because you didn't import it?
No, this is a native thing, so this should always be here. And if I went and I looked at like the,
is it that the message got sent before the handler got set up?
No, it should be. It should wait to actually. So usually you do this, and then once it opens, you can send it. And then this site, at least this site used to exist, and all it would do is just echo back kind of for you to test. So maybe this isn't working anymore. Maybe, you know, Code Sandbox doesn't like this, you know, WSS. I couldn't honestly say. Wow, this Zoom chat is really invasive. All right, so if I was to just look at the networking around that and try it again here, I'll just refresh. And only look at the WebSocket. So now I'm debugging this. It says it's pending and it's finished. So it basically started the WebSocket and didn't actually do anything. So now we're debugging this. Let's kill this because that's not going to do anything.
And it's echo.websocket.org.
Oh, is that what it is? Ha. There we go. Yeah, there we go. That's so much happier. Thank you very much. I just didn't remember it properly. But yeah, so just as an example, you know, and again, I could make it go on forever if I wanted, and it's just going to keep going until it unsubscribes. Yeah. Thank you again for that. So, and this is complaining about the type. This is going to be a string. type. So that would solve that problem. The other thing is like, for some reason, Code Sandbox is not liking RxJS 7 types, which is weird, but not totally unexpected because it's new and we're using the latest version of TypeScript. So, oh, there's why. They're using, you have to use TypeScript 4.2 for it to work properly. So we're just getting some bad types in this particular talk. Sorry about that.
What about Nacho's question about like implementing custom operators safely? Like what is safely and not
so that's
safely?
that's a good question. All right. There actually is some work being done around this. Like I have a PR out and I want to go look at that really quick. Not approved, but authored by, oh, what happened? I hate when things jump around. Authored by moi. There we go. So core semantics. This is a conversation we've been having a lot on the team. And basically what it boils down to is trying to set up like a set of rules. Get this where everybody can see it. Let's display the rich diff. No. View file. All right. So
as well.
this is bad that it did this formatting, but either way, like basically just trying to get a set of rules like, you know, operators must be a function that returns that. This is bad. I'd rather look at the raw instead. They must be a function that returns an operator function, which is, you know, that. The observable returned must subscribe to the source if the operation performed by this. So all of this, like I'd recommend coming and checking this out, but like just to try to be as consistent as possible through all the operators that you make. If you're making your own operator, operators again are functions that take an observable and return an observable. So if I was going to make my own operator, whatever, my cool operator, it's going to look a little bit like this, where it's going to take some type T and an observable of T, and it has to return a new observable of something, whatever that is. Actually, it's going to be probably a higher order function that returns this shape.
Ben, can you zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So, and it's going to return a new observable. Now, there are some weird caveats and tricks to this, but like the main thing that you need to know is that you need to make sure that whenever you subscribe to the source, so if I subscribe to the source in here, you get the subscription. And I'm going to do something with it. Generally speaking, you always want to handle next, error, and complete. In all cases, you're going to want to do something with the value. You're going to want to do something with the error, and that's almost always pass it on. Right? And you're going to want to do something with complete, and that's almost always pass it on as well. Correct your typos as you go. And then like, so you're going to see this pattern, and we're talking also about trying to publish some of the internals that we use to create operators for the public. But in order to do that, we need to make it a little bit more readable and verbose, because ours are like super compact on purpose because we're trying to make things smaller for people. But so you don't have to do some of this boilerplate or whatever. But this is important. If you don't do the error thing, especially, then what's going to happen is if there's an error in your operator, then it's not, or from your source, it's not going to make it past your operator. It's just going to go there and kind of die, right? Or get thrown off to the ether. So you want to make sure you're threading all three of these channels through. And then in here, you would do something with your operator, like maybe, I don't know, next, it's going to take the value and then add an exclamation point to it, right? So this is going to be returning a string always. We'll say, you know, this is make exciting. And T is coming in And in this case, I guess T has to extend a string or a number or something. I guess we'll say it has to be a string or a number. So make exciting. So if I have, say that we'll go back to my source being the interval. Now I can say source, and I should be able to pipe, although it's going to complain because my operator's down here. We'll hoist it. Oh. All right, so make exciting. So now if I go up here and I do this, I can say make exciting. And it should, we should work, yeah. So now it's more exciting because it's got an exclamation point, right? So, but the important bit is like, I messed this up right now. So I've got this subscription, and the problem I'm gonna have is if I unsubscribe here, this subscription's still active technically. Like it's not really gonna work. Like if I go in here and I'm like, hey, put that in there, it's gonna still go afterwards. See, I've got this memory leak problem. And that's because I never took the subscription, and I can either return it in here. There's 3 different ways I can return it. Well, first, there's the way, I can do subscription, unsubscribe, right? So that's one way. And again, this works inside the observable constructor all the time. So that's way number 1. Way number 2, I can just return a subscription here, and it works the same. So this is it's all getting mangled because you have to refresh it to it. So it's going to be happy again. All right. Or the third way, which a lot of people don't know about, but it's very interesting, is you can say subscriber add and just stuff it there, because your subscriber is both the observer and the subscription, hence the name subscriber. So this does exactly the same thing. In fact, whatever you return here, like if I just, if I return something there, that's identical to me saying subscriber add. Like out of the gate, this is just going to take that return value and add it to the subscriber. So like when it comes out the other end. So you can add and remove like handlers and child subscriptions to this subscriber because it's like the parent subscription of what you have going on.
Sorry, I might be the only one, but that last part just sort of melted my brain for a second. Can we sit in that last one for a second? Maybe
Sure.
Once more over that description, why that makes sense.
So the subscriber is both, it's a subscription and it's an observer, right? It's both. And subscription has this add function on it that can take either a function or another subscription, right? Like, so there'd be like a child subscription. And whatever you return from inside of here, if you've got new observable, whatever you return there from inside the initialization function, that just goes to subscriber.add x, whatever it is. So if you've got subscriber here,
and it's doing that because you're invoking that function in the pipe. So source.pipe is returning.
This is how the observable constructor just works, regardless of piping. So it's a standalone piece of observable. If actually, one thing I'm going to do is let me take this subscription out of commission really quick, and I'm going to show you, like, if I say, source to new observable, I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to do a few things. So I'm going to do return console log teardown, because we usually call this the teardown function. I can do subscriber add console log And we'll just say this is subscriber added function. And I can also do, and I'm just going to make add a new subscription to it. So this is just like me manually creating a subscription for our own use case. So I like to import it. All right. So here I'm adding, this is added child subscription unsubscribe. All right. So if I do all of this and I subscribe to source 2, and I don't need to pass anything to it because I'm not nexting anything out. And then I'm just going to unsubscribe right away so we can see what it does. You can see that it deals with this one, it deals with this one, and then it deals with this one, right? And that's because all of these actually get added to this same subscriber. In fact, if I go here, and this might not totally be true because I think we get wrapped in a safe subscriber, but if I go here and I say let s, and then I'm leak it out on purpose. Don't do this, by the way, in your code. This here, console subs, it'll either be the actual subs is the same, or yeah, so it's the same exact reference. See, like literally this, like in theory, if you're a jerk, you don't want to do this because this is just leaked implementation. You can be like there and actually log it out.
But if you tell people not to do it, we'll all start doing it because it's recorded.
Don't do it. It's bad. But you can see I logged it out. And it's just a leaked implementation detail. And the reason it's still leaked to this day is in order to not leak that, we would have to allocate a ton more objects for every observable stream. And it's a big performance hit. So technically those things are on there, but TypeScript doesn't let you do it. There is no documentation that'll tell you to do it. So it's like undocumented. But yeah, just to kind of understand, like this returning something here is identical to this. It just is doing it after the return, if that makes sense. All right. So when it comes to making like safe operators, the biggest mistake I see people do, honestly, is they subscribe to things and they don't track the subscription anywhere. Or worse than that, they'll use an operator like map or something like that, and they'll subscribe to an observable inside of map, and there's nowhere to capture that subscription. So then they've got a memory leak. Like that's very, very important, is always capture your subscriptions and track them and tear them down.
We have a good question.
Okay, so as observable, does as observable actually strip observer methods from a subject? Not really. What it actually does, and we can actually just show you this in the code, I suppose, is it literally is just creating a new observable. And then this is a little internal trick of ours, but pretty much if I were to classify like what this is doing, it'd be like if you had a subject and internally, and I'm not even going to import it, but internally you're going to be like, as observable is going to return like new observable subscriber. And then right, it's literally going to do the same thing as that, basically. So that's how it strips them off, is it just returns to you an observable, not the subject. All right, can we go over what a subject is? Yeah. So a subject, I'm gonna erase all this, sorry, everybody. So I get a clear slate. So a subject is a way to create, I mean, at its surface is a way to create an observable that you can kind of manually push things through. So if I subscribe to a subject, I can't type so bad today. There we go. Subject, next, right? You can just kind of manually push things through an observable this way. And that's kind of what people use it for. But the most important bit, the reason subject was added, is it is a multicast. So I can subscribe to it many times, next once, and it pushes to all of these other consumers like the same value, right? Where that's not the case with an observable. Like in a standard observable is going to be very one-to-one. Like it when you subscribe, it calls the body of the function and it sets up like something to produce data, and then it produces the data. And every time you subscribe, it's going to do that again and set up different data producers. This is like, I've got one single data producer for n subscriptions. Okay. So it's multicasting is like one source to many observers, as opposed to unicasting, which is one source to one observer. All right, so how to make an observable multicast. Fortunately for you, this got a lot easier in version 7. So the best way to make anything multicast is with share. It's got great default behaviors. If we have an observable, and I'm just going to explain this. So it's like, so let's say here's our source, and it's an interval, and it's an interval of every 100 milliseconds. I'm gonna give it a take so it doesn't last forever. We're just gonna take 10 of those. Last 1 second. So if I subscribe to this, subscribe, right? We're gonna see it go. Great. If I subscribe to it twice now, like, so like, let's say I subscribe to it once here, and then like a little while, let's make this a little longer so it's easier to follow. A little while later, let's say like 2 seconds later, I subscribe to it again. You're going to see that what it does is it starts another one. See, it's 0 again. So it's not actually sharing this. It's starting 2 different intervals. And so what we want to do, if we want to share the same interval, is we want to multicast that. And so to multicast that, the easiest thing to do bar none, is share. And as soon as you do that, it's going to push it through a subject. And you can see now it's sharing the same one with both subscriptions. This is by far the easiest thing. Now, share has weird behaviors, and multicasting in general has weird behaviors with totally synchronous observables. But honestly, my recommendation is to stay away from totally synchronous observables, unless you're talking about like, you know, conversion of like with of 1 or of 2 or something like that, because you need an observable and a synchronous observable, or or to switch a value into an observable in some spot. But like, you don't want to process, I'm gonna use RxJS to do this big array processing. Like, it's probably not a big win to do that. So it's probably better to use native array processing functions or something. But if you're dealing with asynchronicity and whatever, and like you normally would in RxJS, and you want to make sure that you don't subscribe to something twice for multiple consumers, you slap a share on there and it just works. Now you can share through different types of subjects. So like, for example, the default is to share through new subject. And so what happens is exactly the same thing. I can share through a behavior subject, or maybe more fun, like a replay subject. So I can do like replay subject of 2. Let's import that. And this is a replay subject is just a subject with an internal cache of, in this case, like the last two values. So the newest subscriber will get the previous two values. So like you can do some interesting stuff with this, right? Like this is showing them combined, even though they came in out of order. But yeah, that's the basic concept is this. So like now with share, you can do, and it has other interesting things like share is by default will reset that underlying. So a subject, once it's complete or errored, it's done. You can no longer push anything through it. It's complete or it's errored. And so you can reset those if there is a problem by saying like reset on complete or reset on error or reset on ref count 0. Ref count being like how many things are subscribed to it and or unsubscribed. These are all on by default with share, but you can change that behavior very explicitly now. So everybody that's doing this, I recommend just using share at this point. There's so many other multicasting operators, but with version 7, you should only really be using share because you can get explicit behaviors that, you can tailor to your actual need and, at least be able to read what it's doing without magic, as opposed to, I don't even know, like the 12 other operators that we have that do this.
I have a quick question. That connector API on share, was that always there, or is that RxJS 7?
This is version 7. This is version 7. So
Cool.
share replay and all that still works. So share, this is basically at this point we've made it into share replay, with the exception of share replay has a weird default of like reset on ref count 0 false would be, and reset on complete is also false. And so this would be share replay explicitly, but like people don't know this behavior, right? When you use share replay, it just magically happens like that. Where if you put this in your code, then people can be like, oh, it's because it explicitly doesn't reset on ref count 0, right? Like it becomes more obvious as opposed to just kind of magically happening. But yeah, so I recommend always using share.
And the reset in that scenario means that like on ref count 0 would mean that if all the multicast listeners were to unsubscribe and then a new person was to subscribe, it would reinitialize like the constructor, like set up a new interval. It would
call this again and create a new subject under the hood. So it resets it calls that again under the hood and then resubscribes to the source. So it completely reconnects everything as it kind of it goes cold, if you will.
Okay. So if this was like connected to an API call or something, and if it was reset, any of the resets would mean that if somebody accessed it or subscribed after the reset, it would make another API call.
Correct.
But before that, it might not.
Correct. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
Right. And if you don't want it to ever do that, you could just go in here and be like, reset an error false. And now once it's done, it's done. You can't repeat it. You can't retry it. You can't do any of that stuff. Like this result here, when it's done, it's done. Like if I wait till that's all done and then I come in here and do set timeout for like, I don't know, 12 seconds from now, which is a long time, but whatever. And I do this again. Like after it's already gone cold, we should see it come in here and then complain. So let's see, I'm gonna wait a whole 12 seconds. So it kind of sucks. Come on. So it did. Oh yeah, because it still has the same replay subject. So you got the last two values, but like it's trying to reconnect to something that it basically just reconnects you to this replay subject, which just gives you the last two values and quits because it's got a replay of 2. But yeah, it's otherwise dead. It's not going to resubscribe to the interval again, for example.
Well, you've mentioned that the observable goes cold, and for the people who are not that experienced with RxJS, what is the difference between cold and hot observables?
Sure. So the difference between cold and hot observables, quite simply put, is this. So a cold observable is an observable where inside of this initialization function, which is what gets called when you call subscribe, you set up some sort of data source. So like inside of here, we could say like, let's do the same. ID equals set interval. So cold would look like this. Right. So every single time I subscribe to cold, it's going to call this and set up a brand new, totally different interval every single time. Hot, on the other hand, would be very similar with one very important exception, which is this interval would have to be like outside here, right? So now you've got this weird problem of like, okay, so this subscriber, really I'm gonna have to notify like all of these subscribers in here, which means that this guy is gonna have to go in and like, I don't know. Put it in an array of subscribers. Typing things as any, sorry, because I'm being weak, but you go in here and say subscribers, push subscriber. And then here you'd have to remove it. Right, so this is all this is doing. And then inside of here, you're gonna have to be like, do for change that around a little bit. So you have to notify everything of the value. So this is hot because the thing that's producing data is outside of this, right? Like this is, or like this, maybe this set interval isn't the best example, but like if I was going to go, let's just say I was going to change this to be like the WebSocket thing, like socket, new WebSocket, whatever that string is in there, and then on message. All right, this would be easier if I did this. Add event listener message. Right, and we'll have to do the same thing where we remove this event listener here. Get the handler. It's going to be this. All right, so we've got this thing here, and this is really primitive, but like this is cold, and hot would be, let's just make this a hot one. Hot is this. Now it's hot. And it's hot because the thing producing data was created outside of the body of the observable. So this is probably a better example. And this is hot. And you can see the reason is this one producer is shared with every subscriber here. And this one is one subscriber for every producer, right? So like once this is created, that producer's hot. It's already giving you values by the time you subscribe to it. This one, the producer doesn't exist. It's cold, it's dead, it's heartless until you subscribe. So hot and cold are kind of really the important things here are unicast and multicast, right?
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. So again, if everyone walks away with anything though, like just knowing what an observable is, it's just a specialized function. It's synchronously called when you call subscribe. It will do anything that's in the body of this part here when you call subscribe. And you use subscriber like callbacks. You can register things to be torn down when it's done and complete. Like observable is the powerful type. The operators are candy. They're interesting, and they exist because observable gives you this thing where you've got this abstraction where you can treat events like sets of things that have a beginning and an end, because you can complete them with, the subscriber complete or whatever, right? So and sets of things that have a beginning and an end can be concatenated. They can be zipped together. They can be combined, like whether they're an array or they're a map or they're a set or they're an observable. But observables are special and interesting because they're events, a collection of events, which gives them special temporal properties. We can do things over time with them. You can delay them and that sort of thing. So it's just a really, really powerful abstraction.
So it was so funny because I told Ben like 3 of y'all's questions and he was like, okay, that's like 2 hours right there. So we are, almost at the half-hour mark. And I know there's 3 things that we kind of wanted to cover. Like, I think maybe if we can quickly go over like this, Vue 3 and RxJS, and why do I need, why RxJS with Vue 3? I think that was one of the questions. And then maybe like a little bit about like how to use RxJS with React, because there's a lot of Angular developers on the call and React developers on the call who are like, okay, well, how do I translate this information over? And then we can hop into testing.
Sure. I think this is where I was experimenting with Vue the other day. So yeah, this is my little Vue app that I made.
Love it.
This little guy's zipping around with a little bit of animation and hitting stuff. So what you have in here, and I actually found out, so I made these helpers. I'm not going to publish them because there's actually a really good library out there that I just contributed to after I saw this, which is Vue use. You can go in here and they've got all sorts of really cool stuff. And if you go way down the bottom here, they've got this use subscription to Observer from, and this is super interesting stuff. So I was using the composition API, and what this is this gives you a ref, which a Vue ref from an observable, and you don't have to manage the subscription or anything. Oh, look, they already have, this is my addition, was the ability to optionally add an on-air message in there. You can tell this is me because there's a dumb comment. But basically, and this is just like an edge case, you don't have to do this bit, but basically here's what you do. And I tell you what, I'm gonna actually add Vue use. I haven't used it directly yet, but Vue use, I think this is the one I want. Is that right? That can't be right. Let's go to the documentation. What does it say? Get started. Vue use /core. So I added the wrong one already. So let's kill that. Is it different as RxJS? Yeah, there's a different one for RxJS. Okay. So if I add the RxJS one and then I come in here to my actual dumb little app, clearly I'm not using those. I should be able to bring in, let's see. Oh, import. And use observable. And I think I'm also going to need to do like their version of from, which interestingly just wraps RxJS is from. So it's in addition to, so it not only does it do everything that RxJS is doing, but it also does converts refs to it. So if I've got refs like these here, ref to observable, this is just going to be from now, and connect to observable. This one's a little different and weird because instead of connecting it to output, I think we just end up being like, wait, are we actually using output in here? We are using output. So this is going to be tricky. I might have to put some thought into this, but I can probably just move this up to here. Oh man. Make this use observable. Get rid of this bit. So, but div locations comes from there. So that means that I'm going to have to move it down a bit. Oh, so it's actually using itself. So I am going to have to, I'm going to have to change this around a little bit because I was actually using the value from one of the locations. So I'm just going to go back to my helper function there. But the helper function is the same exact sort of principle. Let's move things around. Generally speaking, though, I would say you want to use that use observable. This is kind of a weird edge case that I wanted to examine the state of my ref while I was inside of the observable. But so I'm going to bring in connect observable again, which just comes from there. But the basic idea, if you go and you actually look at the helpers, is so if I want to convert a ref to an observable, I kind of pump it through a subject, right? So pretty straightforward. You set up a watch on your ref, and then you just next in the subject, and then I return the subject as an observable. So I have this kind of helper function that does that for me. The other side of it is to convert an observable to a ref. I just need a ref. And then what I do with it is I subscribe, and then I just set the value on the ref, and then you have to make sure to trigger it to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to. And then you use on unmounted to unsubscribe. And that's all that use observable is doing under the hood, is exactly the same thing. So I would not, I would definitely always use that. And the best thing about that is you manage your own state that way. And it's super interesting because when you get down into the actual Vue component itself, you can see like I have this button and I'm saying, okay, when you click it, set X and Y to there. So if I refresh this, it might be busted now. Okay. So when I click this, it's going to set the input X and Y to that. And you can see it made that point, and input is here. But like, look, I've got this click locations. It's literally just pumping values. So whenever I set this in here, it's literally pumping this value into this observable click locations, which then feeds this whole chain, which I'm then connecting to this output ref here. So I will probably put in some sort of PR soon to make this bit possible. But yeah, I honestly think Vue is a phenomenal technology. In fact, this Evan Yu, I was talking to me yesterday, and he was showing me that like all of this export default and stuff, and it doesn't work in Code Sandbox, but you can literally change this to get rid of like all of this stuff and just have everything in one script thing that's labeled like setup. And at that point, it's pretty much kind of like svelte, like you don't have anything. It would just look like this, and this bit down here knows what exists based off of whatever top level things are declared in here. It's bananas. It's really cool, but it requires a compiler that Code Sandbox doesn't have. So but it's I'm super impressed with Vue and the progress they've made, especially with this composition API. Very, very cool. And the
So
helpers
basically
for
you're
this,
going to become a Vue developer.
I might, like, seriously. But I mean, the helpers for this to convert to and from RxJS are so incredibly lightweight, like ridiculous. Like if you if you've ever seen the internals of like async pipe in Angular, like this is a fraction of the code to do the same thing. So it's super impressive what you're able to do with Vue and RxJS. And the other thing is, you notice in the template, there's no sign of RxJS anywhere, which I love. Like you can't see like, oh, I'm subscribing to an observable in here, or oh, I'm nexting into an observable in here. Like you have no idea. Like this is just, you know, whatever you put in here. Like technically, I think I could do some weird thing where I was like, input X plus 100, and just like, and this is input Y or something. So I could just tell it to move over. Yeah, it's bananas, right?
I feel like those red dots and chasing is like me at conferences. Does that remind you of our conference
Yeah,
life?
it is. She even has that elastic effect, right? But yeah, it's super cool that you can do stuff like this and feed it into an observable and have all the power of, you know, doing this sort of thing without needing to worry about subscriptions, without needing to worry about leaking RxJS into your template. Like it's really, really compelling. I like it a lot. So hopefully that answers your questions about Vue. But
What
this
about
is a great
React?
set of tools they have in here too, in general.
What about React and RxJS?
So React and RxJS, which is what I do for my day job these days, it's pretty straightforward. So if I went in and I did, let's see here, generally speaking, what I'll do, let's import RxJS. And I'll just do an interval because it's the easiest thing to do. There are helpers and stuff for it. The problem is there's always one-offs. And so what you end up needing to do is you need to end up like being like, okay, so here's the count, set counter. And then you use effect. And you just create your interval. And subscribe. And then you have to make sure to capture your subscription and return a teardown. All right, so this is basically what you end up doing. It's funny, it's freaking out because it's started multiple timers now, but yeah, so there this is, I mean, this is the basics. And the reason that I tend to do it manually is because sometimes you'll have somebody they'll be like, oh, well, that's cool. I'll make my own custom hook for this. So they'll be like function use observable or something like that. And they take some source and it's an observable. I'm just going to say any for now. And they pop all this stuff in there. And you have to give it some default value. You have to pass in this stuff. You know, what happens if you want to, you're going to say next is set value, but error is what? Then set error. I'm going to have another one up here. And like people will do this thing where, you know, they just assume that you always want to handle the error. And maybe you don't always want to handle the error. Maybe you do want to allow it to go to global error handling. Or, you know, like, do you really need to track the bit for complete? Or is that just extra overhead? You know, you'd probably want to use a reducer in here because you're tracking all three of those things. Like there's just this kind of weird thing where honestly, like, I don't see anything super wrong with this code. And in fact, sometimes you even want to do stuff like I've seen patterns where people want to debounce, like starting this interval a little bit. So they'll be like, they'll put like a timer in front of it. They'll be like timer, you know, some debounce time. And then they'll pipe it to concat map 2, and then they'll put that in there. And then they've got the subscription right after that. Like, so they'll do stuff like that. So this is like a debounce technically, because, you know, if you've got some dependency in there. When it changes, it's going to tear this down, and then it's got to wait this long before it actually subscribes to the thing you care about. So that's just like, I feel like just doing it manually in a use effect with the use state that you need ends up being less magic for people. But if you end up doing the same thing over and over again in your code base, then by all means, like create your own custom hook for this. I know there's a lot out there. I haven't used any of them. I've looked at a few of them. None of them were exactly right. I don't always feel like showing up in somebody else's repository and be like, hey, I'm the RxJS guy and I don't agree with what you're doing here, because I feel like it would just make me a big jerk to go do stuff like that. So, you know, and it's not hard. It's not hard to roll your own hook to do this kind of collection of things. So generally what I do is exactly this. And then, you know, maybe I make a hook for like use observable simple that just does this under the hood, so I don't have to do this over and over again. And then I have to do it more bespoke in other spots. So
amazing. Any question? Basically, Dustin said, this is so much cleaner than every counter I've ever built in React.
Yeah. Well, this is, I mean, honestly, like, if you're building a counter, then you should just, you know, do your counter and just do like, let's see, set interval.
Right. I mean, like countdown timers. I've built so many of them, and I see how this could just be much better.
That's actually one of the things me and Ben did. There was a countdown timer that my boyfriend at the time, he built, and I was like, well, first off, what the hell, this isn't an Angular. And then second off, wait, countdown timer should definitely be an RxJS. So like 1 in the morning, I was like pairing with Ben in Amsterdam, like refactoring this countdown timer to be an RxJS. That was fun. Should we move? Oh, okay. One more question. Any common examples of like a pattern that it would be really helpful for and worth bringing in an extra dependency?
All right. So that's one thing that I actually really do like to talk about. So here's the thing, like RxJS, the places it excels are, you know, one, anytime you've got to deal with, like if you want like unified teardown and memory management of various resources, like, why can't I spell management? There we go. So that's observable, not operators. That's observable. Now operators can be helpful there, but it also adds some mental overhead to stuff. So I recommend it for places where you want cancellation and you want to be able to tear things down. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, Google. Okay, Google. Stop. Sorry, there's like some sort of alert. Anyway, so I recommend it for those situations. And the other one where like you want to use operators and it's for the real like major wheelhouse is for advanced streaming cases or like stream combination of any sort, like if stream or manipulation. So for example, at work, we deal with tons of streaming data that's all, it's coming in and it's coming in like these like weird chunks that are like partial JSON, and I have to convert it into objects, or like, you know, figure out if I've got a whole object yet before I convert it. And then quite often where, you know, like one stream has one type of data and another stream has another type of data, and I need to combine them in some way. And so RxJS is really great for those use cases. Like, honestly, if you tried to do it in any other way, you're probably going to write really buggy code. And like, the funny thing is people look at all the operators and be like, oh, I hate this. This is so hard. I have to learn all this stuff. But if you did like handwritten code that did the same thing, your coworkers would still hate you. They just hate you for code that you wrote instead of code that I wrote. So that's the only major difference. But like, the end of the day, like those sorts of things are very, very hard, and RxJS provides a lot of really well-tested guarantees. The problem is you have to learn, you know, this new vernacular around these different operators and what they do, and that takes some time. I highly recommend getting into these sorts of tools and experimenting with them and figuring out what they do, you know, when they complete and like their interactions with one another and that sort of thing. But these are the two primary use cases. This one, again, observable, not so much operators, but observable definitely, and cancellation, that sort of thing. If you find yourself writing async functions that have 17 awaits in them, probably want to look at doing some sort of functional programming solution there that involves teardown or observable, because I guarantee you there's race conditions in there that you're not thinking of. But bottom line, like promises can't be canceled. Really long async functions will go until they either error or complete. And so like you can get those things racing against each other and not even really realize it. So it's a place where maybe an observable might be a better choice. Those are sort of the places I recommend it for. I don't recommend it for creating counters or creating buttons or doing just simple Ajax. Like you can just use fetch. I don't recommend using React to build your blog and put a counter on it. Like unless you're doing it to learn, that's totally different. Then it's totally valid. But you know, if you're just building a mom and pop brochure site, you know, HTML was probably fine for that. But you know, again, it's the same thing with RxJS. Don't use it unless you have to, or you really want to learn it for some reason, in which case don't use it at work for just to learn it. That's weird. Then your coworkers will hate you probably. But yeah, hopefully that
Until
answers
they
it.
see the value of it.
Question. So I don't know if this goes into stream combination or not, but I know like you've given talks in the past where you've shown like how to do pull to refresh and, you know, things like that using RxJS. Like, do you consider those in retrospect to be academic exercises? Do you think that those kind of scenarios fit under stream combination that you have here?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
how do you feel about like those examples that you've given, or when people come up with situations like that?
So I do think that RxJS is ideal for those because you're dealing with streams of user input, right? Like, and you've got to combine, I don't even know, like n touch events because it'll handle, you know, some between 0 and I don't know, 10, 12 different touch events depending on the device. Plus, you know, all of a stream of drag events, which are a totally separate group of events, right? They come through a different event hook, and then you know, touch end events. And then you've also got like whether or not you're going to load, is it gone far enough? So like there's all of this, like that's advanced stream combination. And so
Okay,
it's
gotcha.
not, when I say stream, I don't necessarily mean just like WebSockets or just, you know, push events from a server. I mean like literally any streaming set of events, which could be user interactions. So absolutely, that's a good use case for it.
I'm looking forward to getting like RxJS and literally all the things. See what's
Right.
RxJS in the code.
RxJS. Well, so here's one example I just had before was animations, right? So animations is basically just streams of updates to the screen, right? So that's another place where maybe to coordinate, like to actually do the animation, do you need RxJS? No, you could totally just use CSS or something. But if you know when when that event like starts, or when the animation starts and the event when it ends, then you can wrap it in observable. And now you can coordinate it with things like switch map and concat map, and you can do different stream coordination with like, did this animation complete, then do this one, or do these two animations at the same time and make sure they complete at the same time or whatever. There's interesting use cases there. So that's again, just event coordination or stream coordination.
Okay, and literally we have 15 minutes for all of us to become experts in testing for RxJS. Experts.
Expert. Got it. So this is going to be tricky. Let's set up a new vanilla TypeScript. All right. So let's just do RxJS in here.
Somebody said once you go RxJS, you never go back.
All right. I'm going to, I guess, test my own operator. Create file. I think you have to just name them index tests.ts in here to be run, but I'm not sure about that. Describe. All right, So we should see this fail in here.
Chandler and others who were wondering about testing, did you have any specific questions about testing?
Yeah, like marble testing and I've heard of schedulers, but I don't know what schedulers are, so stuff like that.
Now is it going to run? How do I get you to run? Run, Forrest.
It's the 15-minute pressure.
Yeah, it is. It's killing me. Like
I'm
this
sorry.
should totally work, but it's not wanting to work for me right now. Why? Oh, maybe it just needs to be called test. Might have to go and configure it. Is it actually configured? This. Oh my God. I don't understand. Certainly I have one. Adoring monad. That's a really good name for this too. I'm so sad.
It's like perfect. They knew you were RxJSing.
Is it even complaining? Does it want to complain? Problems too. Okay, so it does know about that. No problems. Expect, whatever. I don't understand what's happening. Rename. Spec. Oh my God, rename. I can't get this working and I'm very sorry.
Anyone have any ideas?
We did, we wouldn't have asked.
Oh my God, here we go. What are we going to do? Let's Google it. Let's see. So it's saying to name them .spec.js in this case, but we should do .ts, obviously. All right. Let's try that. Rename. Run. Test suites. Expected. It definitely thinks true is false. So that's good. Sometimes if you want to know something's running, you just have to throw an error. No, doesn't like that. All right, back to reading the documentation. See, you can run just by doing that. I'm thoroughly confused by this. Maybe it just doesn't work in.
Is it easier to talk about like schedulers?
All right, so you know what? I don't care if this works or not. Let's just talk about it. So what we want to do is we're going to talk about testing. Generally speaking, people are asking about marble tests, which come from RxJS testing. What you do with this is to try to like deterministically test what happens over time in a somewhat visual way. So you end up having to set up a test scheduler. Or we'll call it Rx test. And it is a test scheduler. And then before each, we need to reset the test scheduler. So to do that, you just create a new one, new test scheduler. And in here, you have to create whatever, so it works in everybody's testing framework. You have to assign what the assert deep equal is. So it's actual versus expected. And you just say, expect actual to equal expected. And what this does is it does an deep equality comparison on the JSON structure of the marbles, or the object structure of the marbles rather. And this gives us a few utilities. So if I'm in here and I use run mode, which you should always do, it will set tests up inside of here and then flush them after run mode is ended. Like at the point that you're down here, it's already been flushed. So this gives you a bunch of utilities. You can make a cold observable, you can make a hot observable. There's expect observable and expect subscriptions. And there's this other one called time. What you can do is you can create a source observable. Generally, you create a cold one and use these marbles. So marbles are interesting. Spaces don't matter. What matters are dashes, which indicate the passage of time in like a single virtual time unit. You can think of it as like a single millisecond. And characters. So this is going to be an observable of strings that's going to emit A and then B, and then it's going to complete where this pipe is. We put a pound sign there, it's going to error where that pipe is. So let's just say that I wanted to add a delay. If I wanted to add a delay, I would use time. And if I wanted to wait this long, I can line this up. It's really interesting. So this space here, white space doesn't count as anything. I can line it up. So I can say like, okay, so this is how long I want to delay from here to here. And my expectation would be like that it's going to look like this. So I'm going to start at the same point. It's not, A is not going to be there. Instead, A is going to be here. And we can do the same thing with a comment, really. Or we can say, okay, well, that means that B is going to be like right there. Why can't I type a pipe? What's wrong with me? So weird. Do I have caps lock on? Maybe I do. No. Anyway. Oh, the backslash because it's a fancy font. That's so lame. So that's actually not a slash because they used italicized fonts. That's a pipe. It's great. Thanks, fancy people. Anyways, that's why you don't use fancy fonts in code. So anyways, so B would be there, and then there's no more delay after that because we're not delaying any values. So we're just going to end it at that point. And then we could test it by saying, okay, well, our result is source pipe delay of T. T is a number that was created from this, right? So this would end up being like 4 or 0, 1, 2, 3, I guess. And then I'm going to import that. Well, we don't not necessarily have to import that, but that's our result. And then we would go here and say expect observable result to be, and then our expected, which comes from up here. So we're expecting this to output these marbles. And you can see we kind of visually align those things. If for some reason we wanted A and B to have different values, you can say A is 1 and B is 2, then that means that down here, we're going to have to say A is 1 and B is 2 also. So it translate those values. If we wanted a value other than those strings. So this is the real basics of this. The other thing that's interesting is you can assert like, okay, well, when anything that was created from hot or cold, you can be like, okay, so I expect the source subscriptions to be here, where it's going to start here and then end here. And you can assert those subscriptions by saying expect subscriptions, and that's to source subscriptions to be source subs, right? And if there's more than one subscription, this could be an array of these. But the overall arching theme, the reason that you do this is to test, generally to test your operators. You want to make sure that it's subscribing and unsubscribing when it's supposed to. You want to make sure that it's having exactly the same effect it's supposed to. Now there's other things that are in there. Like maybe I want to have a delay of like, my gosh, like 1,000 milliseconds, right? That's going to be hard to do with this. You don't want to sit here and do this 1,000 times, right? It's going to be weird. So I don't need this anymore, but like this expectation is going to be absolutely crazy. Every one of these characters counts as a millisecond. So if I'm doing this here, we're going to have to go down. We're going to have to make this the same as the other one, really. And this is going to be between this one and here, there's going to be like effectively 999 milliseconds, right? But spaces don't matter. And then between this one and wherever it's going to be is going to again be 999 milliseconds again. So it's kind of this weird thing that you end up having to do. Now, this also needs to line up with this. Actually, this behavior is going to be a little different because that closed there. So this is actually going to be grouped. So both of these are going to happen at the same time. But this subscription expectation is going to be the same thing. Now, I could go through and do the math and figure out like how many milliseconds to put in here, which is a pain in the butt. Or I can add roughly the same number of spaces in here. And it's going to be the same. And this should actually unsubscribe there, like at the same moment as this, because that's where we're ending it. So that's actually not true. This test would fail. But if you had to do this and line these up the same thing, that in reality this wouldn't be any different. This would be exactly the same subscription. Sorry about that. I should know my own library, but this would be the same subscription because it's going to unsubscribe from the source as soon as it can. But regardless, that's how you can kind of write these things. And you can even do like, an hour or whatever that would end up being. But the weird bit about it is, since each character counts as a millisecond, you have to kind of figure out, like subtract one or whatever to get them there, if that makes sense.
Y'all feel like experts yet in testing?
So honestly, the real thing that I want you to know coming away from this is really cool for testing operators. If you're testing code that has a lot of observables in it, you can just do this thing where you're like, so annoying, sorry. Where in here, you say you've got some component, get component fixture thing. And your component on it, like inside your component, wherever your component is, has some sort of observable thing that you're dealing with, like source, we'll call it. And this is some sort of observable of number or whatever. And you're using it inside your template, whatever. Honestly, what I would do inside of here would be like this: source equals new subject number, right? Then if you can in your comp, you set your source to be this, and then this next on your source, like what happens if I pass 22? Now assert here, and then next do this other number, and then assert here. Like these tests are totally fine, less complicated than trying to deal with this with marble tests. Highly recommend it, because you can just imperatively be like, okay, next and do this, okay, next and do that. Like you probably don't need to get into this really advanced stuff. If there's any sort of delay or timing in there, you can use Jasmine or Jest or whatever in the fake timers and just tell it to, advanced tick, whatever. It's totally fine. Like you don't have to do it the RxJS told me to do it this way. Like I'm not telling anyone to do it this way. This is great for testing operators, because you can test how operators behave in arbitrary, like asynchronous scenarios, right? And you can do it fast and synchronously. This is just fine for testing almost every other case. So recommend this. Or you might even, like in some cases, you might even be like, oh, well, I know what this test is going to be, so I'm just going to be like, of 23. And then you don't have to do any of this here. You just, update your component or whatever. Oh, one step I was missing in here is you probably need to do like, comp update or whatever your fixture is, right? Fixture update after you do that. But if you switch this to of, then this just changes to that and you're fine. Right. So I highly recommend that sort of thing. If you are an Angular developer, there's a lot of examples in the Angular code base of doing exactly these sorts of things, where they're doing like, just look under like their integration tests. So, and the nice thing about those is they're like the simplest scenarios. Like I clicked a button and something updated. I clicked a button and this if statement hid something. Like those sorts of scenarios are what they're testing. And they're setting up component fixtures and doing this exact sort of thing inside of those tests.
I love it. So as all of you know, Ben is on the internet. You can find him on Twitter at Ben Lesh. He is quite nice there. So if you have any additional questions, definitely feel free to reach out to him. Thank you so much, Ben. We covered literally like, I feel like everything.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad. I was worried it's such a short time frame to talk about this stuff. So.
I know, it was so much fun. We loved it. So thanks everyone for coming, and Ben, we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.